the latest research from the Habits book from Brendon Burchard talked about 6 habits of high performers. Do you know what the number one habit was? Was clarity.
You're listening to the Profit by Design podcast, episode 8. You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling, the business psychologist, the author of How to Hire the Best, and your co-host on the Profit by Design podcast. Weekly, my co-host, Mike Bruno, and I bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests, who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real-life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire.
Who wants a t-shirt? Who wants a t-shirt?
So, Mike, we're coming up on 1,000 downloads.
That is awesome. I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Our listeners have been doing a good job of sharing the podcast, and so we want to do something to celebrate them.
Like what?
Like Tshirt Contest.
Tshirt Contest?
Have you seen our cool T-shirts?
The one you're wearing right now? Yes. And I have a couple.
Yes. You have a few.
Yes.
I'm a girl who likes a good logo, and I think we have a good logo for the Profit by Design podcast.
I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
So we are going to give away 3 Profit by Design podcast T-shirts. And all you have to do to enter is we'll put a link to the contest in the show notes, and you just need to be sharing our podcast out there in social media. And the more you share, the more chances you have to win.
Makes sense.
Very easy.
Is it the more you share, the more t-shirts you get?
No, we're giving away 3 t-shirts. 3 t-shirts. And the more you share, the more chances you have to win.
All right.
One of the 3 t-shirts.
I got it.
Yeah. All right. This contest is going to run from November 1st, which is the day this podcast is going to drop. So everyone listening to it, the contest starts today. And then it's going to wind up on Friday, November 9th. And then we will announce our winners. And you will get to pick your t-shirt. We have 2 options, Mike. We have a black t-shirt and a pink t-shirt.
Wow. I would pick the pink one.
I know you would.
And my son's birthday is November 9th.
Perfect. Do you think you'd like a Profit by Design podcast?
I think he would.
T-shirt?
Pink one would be perfect. His 18th birthday. I'm sure he'd love it.
I think we'll let one of our listeners win that pink t-shirt. Okay. All right. And I need to do a request for help from our audience. As all of you know, I am putting out the How to Hire the Best Construction Edition book, and I'm working on the final draft. And as I'm going through it, I'm talking about if you can avoid hiring, you absolutely should. And there's what I really want to share is some examples of business owners who have reduced labor needs through using either innovative materials or innovative building processes. And that's you or someone you know. I would love it if you would email me so I could talk to you and maybe put you in the book and share what you're doing to help other business owners get some ideas about how they might reduce their labor needs. So to email me, just use our show email, Sabrina and Mike at profitbydesignpodcast.com. And Mike, we need to shout out to some of our listeners. We've been getting some good feedback here. So Ron Parmalee commented about Chad Hatfield's episode 4. He found some really good information in that episode. So Ron, we appreciate you listening. And then Edwin Solar and Ellen Humphrey Allen listened to episode 6 with Donna Lyons and said, we all did a fantastic job on that episode. So thank you guys for that. And then I need to shout out a really cool listener here, Heidi Adams. She actually, when I asked for some feedback about different topics we could talk about on the show. She's in rural Wyoming, and she asked for us to do a show on hiring in rural areas. So obviously, that was my first book. We can definitely do that one, Mike.
That's awesome.
So Heidi, we will get that one on the schedule for you coming up. But Heidi said she has listened to every episode twice. So she's a big fan. That just inspires Mike and I to hear that, Heidi.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
And we need to welcome some new profit designers who've joined the Profit by Design Facebook group. So we have David O'Brien, Shannon Simmons, Ann Compton, Dion Bills, and Maria Morris. Finally, I want to acknowledge Christine Era because she gave us a list, Mike, of 5 topics that she wants to hear about on the Profit by Design podcast. And these are meaty topics. So Christine, Mike and I are going to get these different topics on the agenda, and everything from employee engagement, how to move our big rocks in our businesses without complicating things, setting ourselves and our teams up for success, getting out of our own way.
I have that
focusing. You have that one.
Been there.
You're all over it.
Yeah, I'm on that one.
Yeah. So all of you, we want to hear from you, and we want to be bringing you things that you are interested in hearing about. So if you haven't already done so, head on over to the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group, join the group, and then tell us what you want to hear, because we are creating our schedule for upcoming episodes. Hey, Profit Designers. In just a few moments, you're going to get to listen in to a conversation that Mike and I had with Dr. Ken Keis. Dr. Keis is a foremost global authority on behavioral assessment strategies and processes, and an expert in leadership, purpose, and wellness. He's authored over 4 million words of content, including 500 articles, 4 books, and a dozen assessments. It might surprise you to know that less than 10% of the population believe they are living out their purpose, and only 13% of the global workforce say they are engaged. And for Dr. Keis, this is not acceptable. Ken's purpose is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. So as you know, on the Profit by Design podcast, we are all about helping you create intentionally profitable and sustainable businesses to live the lifestyle you desire. Ken is going to share with us some insights that I think will have a profound impact on how you think about your business and the choices you're making. I also want to let you know that Ken is president and CEO of Consulting Resource Group International, otherwise known as CRG, which has served thousands of companies, associations, industry groups, and leaders in over 30 countries. In the past 29 years, he's personally conducted more than 3,000 presentations and 10,000 hours of coaching and consulting. Let me tell you, that is a lot of coaching and consulting. He is a highly sought after author, speaker, trainer, podcast host, and TV and media guest. His latest books include Why Aren't You More Like Me?, Deliberate Leadership, and The Quest for Purpose. So Ken, welcome today. It's great to have you here with us.
Well, it's great to be with both of you.
Thank you. So I want to introduce you to our listeners and let them know that the main reason I invited you on the podcast is because you and I have had an interesting discussion around the need to really understand ourselves as leaders in our businesses. Mm-hmm. And you have a consulting company, and this is really what you specialize in, is helping not just business leaders, but entire business teams get a better understanding of themselves through the work that you do. So I thought it might be good if you share a little bit about your current work, and then I want to go back and hear how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Well, I now own Consulting Resource Group International, Inc. We just call it CRG. It was founded by Dr. Terry Anderson in 1979. And the reason he created the company is he was teaching psychology courses and wanted to create a different tool than DISC or Myers-Briggs way back in the early 80s. Wanted something that was more user-friendly. I got connected to CRG way back in 1990, actually late 89. So we don't want to date this podcast, but it's 3 decades ago. So what my journey has been in that 30 years is, and especially since Sabrina, you were on our podcast, it seems like after doing over 100 shows, there is one single item that just about every expert talks about. And that is, if I don't have self-awareness, I can't have intentionality. I can't be deliberate in my decisions. So one of the things that we do better just about than anybody else on the planet, and I say that humbly, is that we want to help equip individuals to get clear about who they are holistically. So that's why we've created over the last 40 years these assessments and tools that we provide around personality, but entrepreneurship or values or leadership skills or learning styles or self-worth or wellness, because I'm also a health coach. And we take all of that together, say, now I can make decisions. I mean, you teach business principles. If I don't know the benchmarks in my company, such as the P&L and profit margins, then how can I make any decisions? So that self-awareness in your financial statement is what we really do for the awareness individual, and then the leader, and then the teams. And then finally on this, I said, we really, really strongly believe in playing to our strengths. And one of the challenges for entrepreneurs, I didn't tell this story earlier when we were talking, Sabrina, but I used to have 7 different companies. Most of them failed. And here's why, because I wanted to have all my creativity in all these different businesses, and I was misguided in my own counsel to myself. One of the things we want to teach entrepreneurs is that they would play to their strengths, and that as soon as possible in their business, they bring experts, individuals who are gifted in the areas that they aren't interested in, to be able to kind of bring this holistic, comprehensive process, which is what you do for businesses, into their space, rather than just being frustrated with doing things that they are not interested in, not passionate about. I need to be aware of it as a business owner and as a leader. But at the same time, if I'm not playing to my strengths, then I'm not going to be able to sustain my engagement. Then that's really, we want to equip people with self-awareness. What do I do well? What do I need to work on? What do my team members do well? What do they need to work on? And how can we then orchestrate this with language and systems and models that help people to do all of these?
So I'm really intrigued because you are getting at sustainability and how when we work from our strengths, we're building a sustainable business. And that's so much what we're about here on the Profit by Design podcast. Wouldn't you agree, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm listening to all this, and I know both of you are deep into the psychology side of it. And Ken, what you're saying is the absolute truth. And I think what a lot of us as an entrepreneur struggle with. So where does one start? So if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm in the weeds and, I need to start building self-awareness based on folks that you've worked with and your experience, where would you recommend somebody start with that?
Well, of course, I have complete bias at self-disclosure here. We have our own personality or personal style assessment. We have one for entrepreneurs. We also have one just sort of generic. In our work, and that's the work in my book, Why Aren't You More Like Me, and Deliberate Leadership, is I need to understand self. That's like baseline. Every single person on the planet in our work, we believe, has personal style, or what other people call personality. These guide our preferences. These guide our energies. And so that's baseline. And then from there, when we get into business, lots of times my recommendation is they get people like you, Mike, or Sabrina, to be advisors, to be mentors. I was just recently on another show, just actually this morning. And I said, one of the challenges that happens is every single person on the planet has an opinion. Very few people have wisdom. And so when we're getting out of the weeds, a lot of times for entrepreneurs, Mike, is we'll go to too many people. We'll go to this other individual. What do you think? Well, they never owned a business. They've never had employees. And now you're asking them. It's sort of like asking your friend, and no disrespect meant, but you ask your friend how to parent and they've never had kids. Like they don't get it. It just doesn't work. One of my relatives, he's 70 now. He's never had kids. He always telling me how to raise my kids. Well, they're awesome. They're 22 and 23. They're great. He has no idea. So part of, this entrepreneur is make sure you go to wise counsel, not just opinions. Go to people like Mike, go to Sabrina, get and find out who can mentor you, who has the track record, who have demonstrated the success, or like myself, who was basically an idiot a couple of times and said, make sure you don't do this, because we also learn on what not to do as well as what we should do.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, in my case, like I used to torture my wife.
Explain that, Mike.
So yeah, for years and years, I would go home with my business woes and put them in my wife's lap and expect that she had the answers for me. But, exactly to your point, she's not a business owner. She doesn't have an entrepreneurial mindset, and I didn't understand why. If I had more self-awareness at that time and I really understood what I needed, to center myself and to have awareness of what my capabilities were, and then more promptly surrounded myself by wise counsel, using your term, then that would have been a lot more beneficial back then for sure.
What we think about the shift out there, Mike, is coaching. Sabrina and I don't know how long you've been in the business, Sabrina, now, but I was in the business way back 30 years ago where coaching was very, very rare. And I actually got a personal coach way back when I started this industry to help me get clear about, what is my purpose? What is my direction? I knew I was to serve and to help others. But it took me 6 or 8 months to really get clear about what my purpose statement is. And my purpose statement is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. And so all our work contributes to helping others realize their potential in whatever that context is, but also that potential from a holistic point of view. And so it's comprehensive, but it's very, very focused. So we also help people get clear about their values and how they can make values-based decisions versus just what they call situational. And so the more that you are self-aware or clear, like you were talking about, Mike, the more that I can take the pressure off. When you said in the weeds, I get that. I understand that. Is you're frustrated, you're confused, you're unsure. You're on the right track, but they're just confusion really does bring stress. And so the more we can be clear about all factors, or maybe we can go to somebody that can help us with clarity. The latest research from the Habits book from Brendon Burchard talked about 6 habits of high performers. Do you know what the number one habit was? Was clarity. Wow. So if I know who I am, if I know where I'm going, then I can actually get there. And all of us are going through, because life is so dynamic, we're always in an iterative nature or constantly changing and adjusting a little bit for the winds that are going on. So be it. I believe that I will always be in this space of somehow or other contributing to helping others to realize their potential. I'm not exactly sure how that might unfold. Here we are on a podcast. The listeners out there, podcasts 10 years ago, there's hardly anybody. Now there's like 100 podcasts a day seem to be coming online as a streaming input because we have these things called smartphones. And now I can educate myself when I'm walking, when I'm running, when I'm hiking, when I'm just hanging out. Woo, that's cool. So, who would have thought of that 25 years ago?
Right. So I want to dig into this idea about clarity, because this is something Mike and I have had a lot of conversations around. Why are we doing what we're doing? And as entrepreneurs, we get choices presented to us, opportunities, and then we have to make choices about whether or not we're going to pursue those opportunities. And if we're not clear why we're doing what we're doing or what our end goal is, we can just be spinning our wheels, jumping from one opportunity to another. And in terms of, building a profitable business, that really undermines the profitability of a business. You mentioned, you had coaching yourself years and years ago. I know when I came into the coaching industry in the 90s, it was very new still then. So I'm really impressed you found a coach, because I kind of struggled with it. And I was amazed at people going through coach training with me who refused to get coaching. Like they were going to go out there and coach, but they didn't want to get coached themselves. And I decided, if I'm going to have a business, one of my values in my coaching business is walk the talk. Anything that I roll out to my clients, I have to have experienced it myself. So I test everything. I'm my own little guinea pig. And that included coaching. And one of the things that really was such a big takeaway for me from my own coaching that I did back then is getting clear on my purpose, just like you did, and learning my values and understanding how those values play out in every decision we make. Mm-hmm. And we do a lot in talking to our clients around building their businesses based on their values. I know you have a very interesting tool. I was actually taking it myself a couple hours before the call around clarifying our values. Can you speak to that a bit and how you've used that to help people have more clarity?
Well, our values preference indicator comes out of our personality or personal style tool. It's a sister tool. Our work is around what we call internal motivators. So there's contextual values like family, and then there are also values that drive us, and linked to it are needs and fears. So I'll give an example. We have values that are equally distributed between our personality model, so it's not biased. And we're helping people to get clear where if I could make values-based decisions, then I filter this opportunity through it. You're right, Sabrina and Mike, where there's so many choices, in fact, too many. And that's where the confusion that comes in. What would it mean if I could make the right decision every time? And I'm not trying to blow fluff here, is that if I filtered and done the work to clarify my values, then I can use that to screen my decisions and really hold myself accountable to my own direction, because these shiny objects come up all the time. So what our values assessment does is we give people an opportunity to choose from this list, and we call it window shopping. And then we actually take them through a matrix, which you were completing, Sabrina, where every single value is compared to every other value 5 times. So there is nearly 300 decisions in that process. And so, well, that's overwhelming. So what we're doing is we're forcing you to choose. All of us every single day are given opportunities to choose one thing over another. We are stating what we value based on our choices. Many years ago, a friend of mine phoned me and says, listen, Ken, can you come to this real estate investment ground level invitation only event? I said, sure, yeah, no problem. When is it? It was Thursday. And so I'll come by the office and we'll pick you up and we'll go in. So it was about 40 minutes away. Just about 30 minutes before my friend was going to pick you up, my wife phones me and says, listen, Ken, are you coming to the kids' concert directly, or am I picking you up from the office? Kids' concert? What do you mean kids' concert? Yeah, tonight. Or your son is doing a solo in front of the entire student body of 500. Oh, really? And I said, well, I don't know. I can't. I've already, committed to Mike. I'm going to go to this event. It's ground level. And this is back when cell phones where you didn't have restrictions. And so she was driving, and I says, well, listen, you tell the kids that we'll film it and I'll watch it as soon as I get back. She says, no, you tell them. So she hands the phone over to my 9 or 10-year-old son, and I give him the whole story. And he says, Dad, why don't you just say no? And so every moment that we have is that we have these choices of one over another. And yes, I did go to the kids' concert before the hate mail, and it was amazing. He had a standing ovation. It's irreplaceable. So part of this is we need to do the work in advance. And so when you finish these 300 decisions, it prioritizes them. And a lot of times what happens, Sabrina and Mike, is that the first list doesn't match the second list. And so, well, why is that? Well, a lot of times people put values on their list because it's a should. Social pressure, cultural pressure, environmental pressure, a false expectation even in my own head that I want to do it. And so what we're doing is we're forcing people to say that the cream rises to the top. And then for you to vet through that and said, okay, now if these are my top 5 values, let's say tranquility is one of them, or expertise is one of them, is that value being met in my life? Is it being representative? And when we talk about time and energy, we get people to say, okay, is there enough time and energy, or is what I'm doing in my life fulfilling that value? Yes or no? Or give it a gradient value of 1 to 10. If it's no, then what do I need to change? If it's yes, what am I doing to fulfill it that I need to continue to do? So now we have all this intentionality. So quick question for the listeners. If you ever met somebody who says they value something and they never do anything about it? I value my family, but they never spend any time. They value their health, but they never work out. So one of our challenges there, Sabrina, is that if I value something, truly, truly value it, and then I'm not doing anything in it, then I lack congruence. And that is a stress point for me. I have some research that came out of the University of Chicago is that my cortisol levels, meaning my stress levels, go down when I know what my values are. So there's health benefits to knowing my values as part of that process, as well as my decision-making. This was, I think, University of Toronto or UCLA. My decision-making increases or improves because I know what my values are. So it's very much an interactive. It's our second most popular tool. I've done it thousands of times all around the world, and people are just amazed at the end. So, oh, a breath of fresh air. They are now given a system to be able to take responsibility or a framework to kind of now start acting on this. And then the other final comment, I know I haven't taken a breath because I get so excited about this, is who gets to decide if a value is being met? You do, right? And so if you have friendship on your list and you meet with your friends once a month for a card game or dinner or a movie or whatever, then that's fine. If somebody else has friendship on their list and it's every week to go, hang out, then I don't get to decide if the value is being met or not. That is your choice. So we really equip people for, this whole idea of self-awareness moving into self-management is I want to equip you to fish. I do not want to create assessments that create a codependent relationship. I want you to be able to have information that once we've disengaged, you can act on it independently of me. And that's so important to empower others to make lifetime or decisions for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. That was really good.
There was that my micro seminar on values.
When you were talking about the stress levels and how our stress levels rise when we are not in congruence with our values, it got me thinking about so many of our listeners out there who I think live in a chronic state of stress. And I started thinking about, wow. So some of that stress definitely is just because of the chaos in the business, systems that need to be put in place, lack of quality team members, and, needing to develop the skills to do all of that. But then I'm hearing you speak to, there's a whole other level of awareness or lack of awareness that we can have that can be contributing to our stress levels. And that's just not being aware of our core values and not being aware of how what we are allowing into our lives or not allowing in our lives, that incongruency there.
Ken, these are fascinating insights that you're sharing with us. I want to take a pause here and hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, I want to dig into what you shared with us just a little while ago about stress. That's really got me intrigued.
This episode of the Profit by Design podcast is proudly brought to you by Contractor Business Solutions, the Small Business Consulting Group, and Tap the Potential, the home of How to Hire the Best and the 4-Week Vacation Program. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to learn more about our sponsors and to catch previous episodes of the podcast. And by the way, while you're there, be sure to check out the conversation between Mike and I that 95% of entrepreneurs never have. We blow up the dirtiest little secret in the entrepreneurial world. Mike, I know you have some experience that where you have done some significant thought around your values and what's important to you. Can you relate to that? With the stress levels going down as you brought your life into alignment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's a good lead to really a question that I have, and I'm sure our listeners will be interested in some feedback on the answer. So when I first started digging into self-assessment and taking DISC assessments and some other, different behavioral assessments and value assessments, I enjoyed taking them, but I didn't understand what it was. And what I mean by that is when I did the assessments, I read the responses. So on my DISC assessment, it speaks to my, general, kind of aggressive type of behavior and a very decisive mentality. And I used it for the wrong reason. I almost used it in my toolbox, in my arsenal against my employees to say, I really am a lion. So get out of my way, because if you don't do what I'm asking you to do or you can't do it, I'm going to do it. And I'm the king of the jungle and I'm right. And everything's we're going to power through everything. And that created more stress because I didn't take a step back to say, what does this really mean? And how could I make myself immediately better or get on a path to self-betterment and more awareness to be able to utilize this in a positive way instead of, maybe internalizing it and then using it in a negative way. So my overall question is, what are some tips and best ways for people to translate the results of different types of assessments and be able to create a set of, small action items to be able to utilize the benefit of the assessment, start to have that self-growth in the direction that's going to take them to a higher level?
Well, thanks for that. When we think about assessments, so Sabrina will know about, there are different kinds of assessments, Mike. Some that are trying to be quantitative and predictive. In what we're suggesting in our work, we're trying to do assessments that are self-development in learning in nature. So it's not something I do to you, it's something I do with you. So when we take assessments, what's the mindset about it? Is it something to get the report? No, the report means nothing if I don't do anything with it, if I don't apply it. So if I get my P&L and I find out my margins are 10% and the industry average is 20 and I do nothing about it, that doesn't help me anything, right? So the other thing in our tools is our tools actually don't create the results. The results are already there. When you go to your doctor and get a blood pressure test, though there's research that shows it goes up because you're nervous, but the doctor didn't create your high cholesterol level or your high blood pressure. That was there before it. So all we're doing in the assessments is benchmarking a condition. What you're saying, Mike, is, and to the listeners there, is now what do I do with it? And that's one of the masters or the mastery places that we're at, is that it's never about the assessment, it's what my actions are. It's the steps. Is it easy and simple enough for me to engage it and do something with it? And we have a couple other statements, Mike, and I love your comment about, we call it behavioral in our model, is that your style is not an excuse for your behavior. And the other statement is either you're in control of your style or your style is in control of you. So even though we started the show and said you need to play to your strengths, sometimes our strengths are our greatest weakness. So if I'm in construction and I only bring a hammer and that's all I bring to the site, well, I'm not going to have a lot of flexibility. So part of what we teach people, and we have a whole model on credibility and building credibility with others and communicating with others, is that I need to be in charge of self. So self-awareness is part one, but then self-management is part two. And there was some research around leadership. And this came from Peter Carrera's work. And that was, what were the two factors that hindered and caused leaders to fail? And number one was a lack of emotional intelligence or interpersonal communication skills. And number two was hubris or ego or arrogance, meaning, you know what? I'm a lion and that's just the way it is. So suck it up, princess, right? So as Mike laughs on that one. So here's the reality is, just because I'm a certain way, yes, I want you to play to your strengths. But if I only use that, if I don't develop what we call style flexibility, if I don't develop another skill we teach, which is suspending. Now, you might or might not be aware of Dr. John Gottman's work, who works in personal relationships in Seattle, Washington. Here's what he proved with all his work. Created a thing called the Love Lab. No, it's not what you listeners are thinking about. The Love Lab was around where couples were in conflict, and then he tracked everything. He had videotapes, he had EKGs, he had blood pressure, everything. Here's what he proved, is that when my heartbeat goes over 100 beats per minute, I am no longer rational. And so when we think as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a partner, as soon as I lose it, then I can no longer have rational conversations, and I'll say and do things that are inappropriate. So not only am I aware of my style, but now I'm managing it. I'm not letting my style hinder or negatively affect my relationships. That is, I'm now in charge of myself. Now, I'm not saying that I don't prefer to be driven or direct or to be decisive. But if I have a whole team around me that's not that way and I don't adjust to them, then I'm just going to create havoc and chaos in my business or in my relationships. We've all seen it where a parent in a grocery store has a 4-year-old who's taken them out, where they say, so the parent says to the 4-year-old, you keep acting like that, I'll leave you here. What? You're never going to leave your 4-year-old there. But they're so upset. All the research shows, even from parenting. And my wife's actually, works at a university. And I want to back up one point here around this stress thing that you talked about, Sabrina. A lot of times people are in businesses or doing businesses for the wrong reasons. We're not talking about purpose. And so she works with international students. And so she has had some students in her as an academic coach in her office in tears because the parents want them to take over their cosmetic manufacturing company. They're in the university taking sciences and they hate every minute of it. They want to go into arts. They want to go into acting. Maybe they want to be a painter. So a lot of times there's sort of expectations. I grew up on a dairy farm. I'm the third generation firstborn male from Eastern European descent. Do you think there was some pressure for me to take over the farm? Are you kidding? So I went to agricultural college came home, and 2 years in, both of us wanted to be in charge, Dad and myself. It was a fight every single day. And so it took a lot because everything for my whole life was nurturing and directing me towards taking over the farm. And, there's a lot of sort of pressures that are around that. And then I finally left and took different jobs and then moved into sales and then moved into sales training, which got me into this industry, 30 years ago. But I said, whoa, I can see how many people are in businesses that were sort of directed generationally into it. They were said, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to set that up. The other thing, Sabrina, when we talk about purpose, is a lot of times the business controls us. We don't control the business. Yes, I know there are times when we start a company, it takes 60, 70, 80 hours in a week. I get that. I understand that. I'm just talking about long term. Does the business that you're in, is the business that you're running reflect the lifestyle and the values that you have at your core? And if you can't reconcile that, then it is not sustainable because you're going to constantly have this void, this gap, this vacuum of not being able to match your business to what you really, really want. So an example is my goal is to have 2 to 3 months a year traveling, doing things or just time off. Well, I can create a residual income through IP. I'm not at a 24/7 grocery store or corner store. And so that's how my business is evolving to the point where we have legacy product online or assessments online that anybody, anytime, 24/7 can go and take them. So that's the question for the listeners. Does the business reflect those values as well as what's your passions? What do you enjoy doing? What do you like doing? What's a natural talent for you? What's the gifts? And those are some of the questions we want to ask ourselves going forward.
Mike uses the term lifestyle business. And I think that's a term that can be misunderstood because many times when people think of lifestyle business, they think of like Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week. And I've heard Mike use this term in the context of just what you're describing, Ken, that it's about creating a business around your lifestyle and making choices in your business to suit your lifestyle. And I imagine many of our listeners are hearing you speak to this and they're self-identifying. They're saying, oh yeah, that's me. I'm in this business because it's been in the family and I inherited it. And here I am trying to run it. Or there's business owners who just landed in doing what they're doing, never having thought about what do I really want in my life and connecting the two, the business and what you want out of life. And they're hearing you speak to this. So, and I know you've written your book around the quest for purpose. So if someone's listening and they're realizing, holy smokes, I've got myself on a trajectory that's just, I'm not clear on my purpose. I'm not clear. I know somewhat what my values are, but I know I'm not happy in my business. What would you say to them? What would be some next steps to start moving this forward?
Well, first of all, the mindset is this. If I don't know what my purpose is, then my purpose is to find my purpose. So we back away and we say, okay, what's my job? My job is to get clear. If I'm unclear, my job is to get clear. That's my job. That's what I'm going to do. So when I went to my coach way back in the late 80s, I actually wrote 40 or 80 pages of, this is before computers, Mike, if you can believe it, is handwritten journal of what's really important to me. One of the things that happens is, and I've written it in the Quest for Purpose in an entire system, is that our life leaves clues, but most of the time we're not paying attention or we're moving so quick, we're not backing away from it, just starting to take account of what's going on. So the recommendation is, first of all, take a breath. Don't get stressed about your current condition. It's not going to help anything. It is what it is. If your business is working for you to a certain extent now, fine. So now back away, and now your new job is to discover and to clarify what is it that I really, really want. In other words, that becomes one of your responsibilities. And take as long as it takes to do it. And don't get all freaked out that you didn't figure it out in 5 minutes, because it does take time to filter, to verify. You know, my daughter is 22. She turned 22 actually yesterday before we're recording this show. And she is so capable, so able. Said, Dad, what should I do? And I said, well, you're going to figure it out, because she has several things that she can do. And she wants to go into entrepreneurship. But she says, you know, can I set up there? And says, hang on. Sometimes you decide what you're going to do because you know what you don't like. So Sabrina, you talked about, what do I want to say no? What do I dislike? So, I mean, even Anthony Robbins talks about sometimes coming through the back door. I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. And so both of these approaches help to filter down and filter out those things that I'm not going to consider. So then what's left? What is it that I do love doing? I get people to, in the end of the book, and I did it personally. So Mike McManus was my coach. He's passed away many years ago now. He was an educator and he was really helping students get excited about their life. As I create, at the very end of the book, you create what I call a keyword focus point, which is 12 words that represent your life. And for me, my words include speaking, travel, encouragement, writing, flexibility, excitement. So these are words that are themes. And I said, I can keep looking at this almost like it's a values sort of setup where I bringing all these pieces of the puzzle and say, how do I create a position or a job? The reality is when we think about SIC codes, or in Canada, they're called National Occupational Codes, there's 40,000 job titles in the US. Most people don't know that. But there's no job title for what I do. Now I suppose they're an SIC code for a podcaster. I suppose. Maybe there is. I don't know. So the reality is that maybe the business that you're going to do isn't even invented yet. Maybe it's a hybrid version of something or other. So go for it. And again, take responsibility. None of this is going to happen by accident. To go and figure out your purpose, the research shows is that less than 10% know that they know that they know. And most of us are familiar with the Gallup survey that came out 2-3 years ago with 142 countries, right? So this is the global condition, is 87% of employees are disengaged. What? Wow. So that only leaves 13% of the population that are in the zone, in the flow, in their purpose, whatever word you want to use, in their element, if you want to use Kenneth Robinson stuff. So my encouragement is don't be one of those 87%. Just take responsibility one step at a time. Hire Mike and Sabrina, get my book, and then from there, start going forward in that area. There's lots of people that can help you. Don't try to do it alone. Do get advice from people who know what they're talking about. Because again, as I said earlier, everybody has an opinion. Very few people have wisdom. And then start making a step-by-step process. Baby steps, as Bill Murray said in his movie, is fine. It's okay. You don't need to transform it overnight. And sometimes you don't want to abandon. In fact, we would recommend don't abandon that business and just go somewhere else. Just do it one step at a time and say, how do I rejig this thing?
Absolutely. So I have a couple more questions for you, Ken, but I want to give you a moment here to share the gift that you have for our listeners around the quest for purpose.
Well, it's interesting, as we get older, there's a new study out from Harvard said that one of the contributing factors to longevity is generosity. And growing up on the farm, you always gave the neighbors what they needed or want, right? Piece of equipment or something like that, help. So I'm going to gift everybody that's listening a e-copy of my newest book, The Quest for Purpose. And they can go to my speaker site, which is Keis, KENKEIS/profit. So that's specific landing page for Sabrina and Mike and listeners here at Profit by Design so that you can get this free copy. Now, I can't make you go to that site to go get it. You have to do it. It's there. It's free. No strings attached. Get the ebook and all the steps are in it. And then if you want to ask more questions or whatever, then there's all the information there. So it's Keis, KENKEIS.com/profit.
Thank you for that, Ken. That is very generous, and I can't wait to check it out personally. Now, I also want to dig in a little bit more about personality because, I'm a psychologist. I can't resist. You talk about understanding personal styles, and you have another book, Why Aren't You More Like Me? And boy, if that isn't a question that runs through our head all the time with the people that we deal with. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just be like me and we'll all get along? So why is just this understanding of personality differences and acceptance of differences so critical for our success, not just in business, but in our personal lives?
Well, from just a purely biological point of view, is personality or personal style, in our opinion, every single person on the planet has it. It defines us. And so somebody asked the question, are we nature or nurture? Well, our answer is you're both. Okay, so we have all these environmental factors that contribute to us. But I also have a theme, a personhood a essence of who I am that is consistent throughout our lifetime. That's what we call personal style. And why that's important is that it influences everything. How we see relationship, what we expect from others, how we filter things, how we show up. So I'll give you an example. I had an employer had a 400% turnover in their employee group, which was a credit collection call center. And he was hiring people with a personal style that was interpersonal and also had values of tranquility. Well, their number one need is harmony, a lack of conflicts, right? Well, the reason he did this is he wanted the nicest credit collection department in the entire country. And that's why it was a 400% turnover, because that was not sustainable. It's not who they were. So the more that I can get clear about who I am, then I can make these intentional decisions. Now, here's the other side. Everybody's different. If I'm actually going to be successful in life and have a business, guess what? I'm going to probably have to hire people who, quite frankly, irritate me, who really aren't a lion, Mike. They are cognitive. They want to go slower. They want to check all the details. And your speed is irritating them. And so part of this is this understanding of others. And a lot of times we have a licensed associate program and we have a couple that does marriage retreats. So a lot of times we marry or we have partners or significant others who are opposite of us. So we have this couple that does marriage retreats. And they said a lot of times we will marry people who are opposite us. And so we are attracted to them. But then when we get married, they irritate us. The other one is when we think about even from a parenting point of view is a lot of times we want our kids to act like us. So we're constantly filtering life through our biases. One of my partners, Dr. Mitch Davidi, does law enforcement training across the entire U.S. through the National Sheriff's Association. Our book, Deliberate Leadership, is the leadership version of Why Aren't You More Like Me? It says all of us have implicit bias. That's what they're teaching law enforcement or first responders. So we want to make sure that our bias gets out of the way of relationships, gets out of the way of decisions. Yes, I'm going to play to my strengths. And Mike, you're going to have a business where you're independent and you're going to make your own choices. But as soon as I start working with other individuals, I need to take into account who Sabrina is, who Ken is, who somebody else is. And what are their needs and wants? It's the highest level of respect towards others. It's the opposite of being self-centered. And we're, with a culture today, it's all about me. The reality is that I can get what I want in life when I focus on your needs first and mine second. I'm not saying it's easy. It's one of the most difficult things to do. So in our work, we used to have a marriage counseling business. And then when I work with clients as a consultant trainer all around the world, we will refuse to work with our clients unless they take the assessment because it influences everything and helps to create a consciousness, Sabrina, for them to be able to kind of go forward. And it gives us language to talk about how you show up, what your preferences are, what you do and what you don't do. Now, here's the other side, finally, is that personal style is important because we believe it's consistent throughout your lifetime. Yes, you mature, you grow, you expand, you educate yourself. But if my essence wasn't the same, then Mike, you would be like Sabrina and Sabrina would be like you tomorrow. I can count on me being me tomorrow. If there wasn't consistency throughout my lifetime, there would be chaos, complete chaos, because it'd be all over the planet. My interest would change tomorrow. And now I don't like speaking anymore. Now I'm going to be working in construction. And the day after now I'm a plumber. And the day after I'm an electrician. And the day after, I better have a car dealership. Whoa. So part of this is the beauty in sort of human beings. Now I'm a spiritual person, so I believe there's intentionality behind everything. But with this, you can count on that. And the research shows that. Otherwise, we have this consistency. And then finally, I want to tell this little short story. My son is a gifted entrepreneur. He's now moved into real estate, but he was a pilot at 16. So in Canada, there's a thing called Air Cadets, and he got all the courses covered for him. And so now he's 16, 17, 18. He's a licensed pilot before he actually was fully licensed to drive a car on the road. And one of the things and conclusions he came to is, Dad, I don't like the lifestyle that pilots have. He loves flying. So it's interesting as we go through it with my own son. He said, I want to have something that allows me to have this flexibility because he wants to have a lot of variety, has entrepreneurial opportunities, but flying wasn't doing that for him. He knew, so all of a sudden on a long haul, I'm not home. If I'm flying over here, I'm not staying at my home. I want to be with my family, my wife, my kids eventually. So I'm not going to do it. So even though he's passionate and gifted and loves flying, he made an intentional decision that the lifestyle that it was going to do was not his career route. So now he has, and started as a very young and successful realtor and just loves it. And he says flying is just going to be a recreation.
So we are always at choice, and we can re-examine our choices. I love that. That's a great way to conclude here. So for our listeners, I imagine Dr. Ken has given you a lot to think about today. And good news for you is he has his own podcast. I've been on it. He interviewed me recently, and his podcast is called The Secrets of Success. So thank you so much for being with us here today, Ken.
What a pleasure. You guys rock.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Profit Designers, did you find today's conversation with Ken to be thought-provoking? Mike and I sure did. We had a lot to talk about afterwards, and we actually came up with some questions that we're curious about, and we want to hear from you with respect to your experiences. So we would love to know, have you ever done assessments in the past, but then struggled with what steps to take next? And we're also curious how frequently you've taken assessments, and if you have ever thought about taking an assessment and then using it as a tool to track your growth and put a self-improvement plan in place that you've managed proactively. So if you've ever done that or had that experience, we want to hear from you. So I'm going to pop these questions into our Profit by Design Facebook group. And after you listen to today's episode, we'd love to just hear from you in response to these questions or anything else that Ken talked about. The other big part of the conversation that Mike and I got curious around is just the experience of wanting to be on purpose and connect with our purpose. So we'd love to hear from you on that as well. Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. Share your thoughts on today's episode, ask us questions, and let us know what you want to hear about next. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to access resources from our sponsors and tools we've created for you. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to right now. There's a subscribe button right there. Go ahead and hit it so that you always get a notification when we release a new episode. And finally, share our podcast with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.